And so this has been the output from this tutorial about creating a still life, and what I'm showing you here is how to pull in previously modelled objects from many different Blender files, also how to pull in materials so that you can create something using lots of things that you've already done and save yourself a bit of work. And I'm also showing you how to put all those together in an interior setting, and the techniques in Blender that are used for interiors are totally different from those used for an outdoor shot. So let's get on with it. So today I'm going to show you all about bringing models in from other files, and while I'm doing that I'm going to make a still life. So this is kind of also how to set up an interior stage as well, because we really want this to be reasonably believable. So I'm starting off with our block here, and this is going to be our room, so I need to scale this up somewhat. And when you're doing an indoor scene, you really do need some sort of indoor environment, because with Blender cycles, and I'd better change this to cycles before I forget, it does very realistic modelling of light. So this is why some of the scenes before looked a bit lackluster, because there was nothing there to actually reflect the light. So this is going to be our room, and our camera is going to have to go inside our room. Probably need to scale up a bit more anyway. And one of the things I can do, I'll just go into view front, and I will take this up so that the floor is the floor. One of the things that I need to do is to create a way for light to get in. Now with human, I'll just check that I can see through that camera. Yes, I can. With human dwellings, the light comes in through windows. So that's exactly what we want. We want a window. So if I just do view selected, that'll get us a view of the outside again. Now this is going to be a sun lamp, and I haven't used a sun lamp before. That's because they're pretty damn strong really, but it's going to be shining through a window, and I want a reasonably low sun, somewhere off to the right like so, and turn it into a sun lamp. Use nodes, which lets us change the probably about 500 would be good. And the colour, well, it's the sun, it wants to be very slightly yellow. It's the evening sun, it wants to be slightly towards the orange. So we want to make a window, so we need to select our box. We need to go into edit mode, and we want to do some loop cut and slides, and I'm going to do 2. The other way. This is going to be our window here in the middle, and I'm going to select that face, and this is a bit of a quick and dirty way. It's not the recommended way of doing it, but it works. I'm going to subdivide that several times, and I'm going to take out some of it. So I'm going to hit A to deselect, C for circle select, and let me see. I'll take out that whole, didn't mean to select that other one. I hit escape and right click again on this face. It should have shift right clicked it, sorry. Let's do this again. This time I'll use box select, it's going to be easier I think. So I'm going to box select, and what I want to do is I want to take out 3 lots of these. Control Z, X, should have selected faces, that's better. Box select again, sorry, B for box select, and B for box select again. Oh no, hang on, better delete it first, faces. B for box select again. And what I'm making is kind of the shadow of a window frame. No need to worry about glass because we're never going to see the window, it's going to be behind the camera. And why do work that you don't actually need to do? And we'll B for box again, and select this little lot. So there, that's that, and I want that shadow from that sun to come somewhere on that surface in there. So I'm going to be selecting the sun, going back into object mode. I'm going to be selecting the sun, dropping it down, rotating using the R key. I'm going to be rotating the light, and the way sun lamps work is that the light will be going in that same direction all over the scene, and that will do I think. Now if I view camera and go to rendered view, you can see what we've got with a lot of noise. We've got a nice light inside our room, and the light wants turning down a bit, it's too bright at the moment. I'll take it down to 200. Maybe take it down to 100 or even 50, and that's reasonable. Now at the moment there's no material on this box, so that's the next thing we need to do, is we need to go back to our view selected, having selected the box, and we need to give this box a material. So we're going to materials, and we're going to change the name of this material to wall, and I'm going to make a plaster wall in there. So how do we do that? Well, we go into compositing, use nodes, click on the shader tree, and we haven't hit use nodes on materials here, which we need to do. Yeah, there we go. Right, so I'm going to make this a kind of creamy colour, an off-white colour, not too dark, otherwise it won't bounce the light up off it. I'm going to take the roughness right up, and I'm going to add in a texture, and this is going to take a little bit of experimentation. So what I'm going to add in is probably going to be a Musgrave texture, because I know that you can make a decent plaster effect from a Musgrave texture. Blowed if I can remember how you do it. I know you can. So I'm going to add in a bump node. I'm going to add in a maths node. Set the maths node to multiply, and I've done this often enough with you before now. And that's going to be into the displacement. I want something like 0.1 in there. I want to turn the strength down a bit, and I'm going to take the factor output into the normal, and I'm going to set this to rendered view. Actually, I'm going to start off with the colour. Add the colour in there so I can see what we've got. So that's that. And do I want which one of these do I want? Aha, that looks more like it. I want to turn the scale right the way up. So at the end of the day, this wants to look like stucco. Obviously we've got a problem here in that we can't really see the camera or anything with this in the way, but we still want to see this, and this is how you solve that. Perhaps a little bit lower than that. And I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to click on the edge select tool there, right click on that edge, E to extrude, hit escape, and just drag that straight down so our table's got an edge to it that's visible to the camera. Really good. Right, now I want to set up camera view, align view, align active camera to view, and view top. The camera's gone all the way over there. Back into object mode, select the camera, bring it into the room, put it somewhere that looks logical, and we're too far inside the room. I want to go back here. It's always a good idea with a main light like this to have it coming over the shoulder, the right hand shoulder of your cameraman, if you imagine your cameraman standing there. And that's nearly there. G for grab, pull the camera down, and that'll do just for playing about with. And now for the first bit that I said I was going to do. We're there at last, importing some stuff from other files. So if I go, first of all, get out of camera view, come back a bit so we can see what we're doing. and I'm going to start importing stuff. Now you go to the file menu, and you've got a choice here between link and append, and the two of them are very different. If you link something, you can't make any changes to it because it exists in the other file and it's only brought in when Blender needs the information for rendering. If you append, however, a whole copy of that object comes into the file that you're working in, and you can do whatever you like with it. The real use for link is if you're making very large scenes and you're worried about file memory. So I'm going to use append because I'm not worried. And you navigate to the file. I've got a folder called assets, and I want two things out of here. Then we can go to object. You can also import materials. You can import just the mesh from something. You can import the whole scene if you want to. But I want objects, and I want my apple. And I'm going to import an apple. So we hit append from library, and there's an apple. It's a bit of a huge apple, but it's an apple, and that's a start. So I scale that down roughly. I'm going to have to position that later, and I'm still appending objects, and we want append, and go to the next thing I want is a plate and a cloth. That's in here. So I've got the cloth, and if I think I can do this. If I hit control and no, I'm going to have to do them separately. Okay, append from library. There's a cloth, a bit like the cloth we did the last time, if you remember. So I can rotate that. Whoops. In the Z-axis to kind of match our table, and I can lift it up and I can scale it and move it about as I wish, and likewise I'll sort that out later. Now I want to also add a plate. Append plate, and there's my plate. Likewise, it's a bit big, scale it down a bit, and I'll have to play with all these scales a bit later when I'm actually composing my final scene. And I'm going to add in the box from our actually, before I do that, I've got a really nice coffee jug, one of those big Moroccan brass ones I made for something else, and that's in here somewhere. Oh, aren't I naughty? I forgot to rename things. And that's a bit of a bugger. It might be circle. I probably haven't even joined things actually. Okay. So I need to go into there. This is why it's important to rename things sometimes. So if I save this file, I'm going to call it Still Life. had that open to look at it earlier this morning. Coffee blend, there it is. And there it is. What it is I haven't joined all these objects together and renamed them, because it's made of 1, 2, 3, 4 objects. I need to join those and transform origin to geometry so that it rotates in some sensible way when I go and play with it, and I need to go into there and rename it. I just need to check that I've got everything, I haven't left anything behind, or no, there's a curve there that I don't need that I used to make the handle. I can delete that. That's cool. So now I can save that file, reopen my still life file, go into file, append, and we want coffee. This time when we go into objects, we've got one called coffee jug, which is exactly what I want. And there it is. Again, it's a little bit on the big side. I mean, they are big anyway, these Moroccan coffee jars, they're bloody huge. So, put him in there. Now, I'm going to go and get our box. And I want append. This time it's in the desktop, I know it is. Object. Aren't I naughty? I've done the same thing there, but I know it's called Q. So that's append from library. And there's our box that we had, that we made earlier on. Scale that right down. File. Append. Grapes. There's our grapes. Looks a bit weird because it's huge and it's rotated. Scale that down. No problems. Right, so is that everything that I want? Got an apple, got grapes, got the box, got the coffee jar, and I think that will do actually. Now, I'll get the glass, might as well. File, end, and there's our glass. Just to keep some continuity, because that was the first thing we made, wasn't it? Now, if I go into camera view and I can arrange all these. The first thing obviously I want to start with what's on the bottom, which is the tablecloth. And you can see I'm like way miles away. So I want to grab in the X direction. That wants to go back probably till it's somewhere around about there. And then drop this down slowly until we can start to see maybe the table has poked through it. And keep taking it back. And up into the corner there. So what's going on here? It doesn't matter about it sticking through the wall, you just won't notice. So that's okay. View camera. Right. So let's get that glass out of the way for the moment. Let's bung our coffee pot in there. And that can be about the right height. And then we're going to rotate it RZ. Rotate it to be this way a bit. That's cool. And we put our glass in here. Scale it down a bit. I'm going to bring our apple in. G for grab. Stick it in there somewhere. Scale it down a bit. Doesn't want to be a huge apple probably. And I'm going to Y. And I'm going to duplicate it. Z. And I've kind of picked the way that an apple would normally sit. I'm going to scale it down, but I'm going to make it a bit smaller. And Y. And just tuck it in behind that other apple there. And that's kind of a reasonable composition. And now what I want to do is I want to sort out the camera view. So I'm going to click that outside frame to select it. Go into the little camera picture there. It's called camera details, I believe. And zoom in. Not that far. I think I want a 4:3 because it wants to be not so wide as that. So I'm going to have a 4:3 aspect ratio. So if I select here, which is rendered, and there's dimensions, render presets, TV power 4:3 maybe, which is a bit better. Go back to the camera settings, we can actually zoom in a bit more now. Something like that. And I wonder what that would look like. And we're almost bound to have not quite enough light. Which indeed is the case. We've got not quite enough light. Actually, I'll move it over a bit more. Now, you remember I said that we can import a lot of things, not just objects, we can import materials. Now here's how you do that. File, and I'm going to append it, and this is already set to our glass blend file. If I click on materials, you see you've got all these materials, and I'm hoping I called it something like table. Unfortunately I didn't. So I'm going to have to append all of these and choose the right one. Append from library. I'm going to select the table, and it'll be the darkest material, which is that one, I believe. No. It's that one. For sure it's that one. Well, I'm going to go and render this properly. I'm probably going to have to turn up the sun even more. Looking at it, actually I think the angle in the other direction is wrong. Let's just quickly check that. I'll cancel that render. Yeah, what it is that my window's not tall enough, so that's easily fixed. Select that, go into edit mode, A to deselect everything. B to box select. Box select that little lot. Drag it up. And have I got? Oh, I've got that firewall. That's because I've got maximum draw type wire set. So I will shift and right click. Aha. I have to aim it through the window to deselect. That's fun. So it won't let me select through it. What it's done is selected through the holes. Right. So back to object mode. And we should have some light. And I will in any case. That's better. It's more like the light levels I was kind of expecting. All I have to do now is sort out the render quality, so I'm going to go away and render it, and we're way too bright on our light. But I'll fix that as well. I'll come back and I'll talk you through the settings. And here at last is the output. It took a while, 35 minutes roughly, so it's quite good quality as you can see, and I've made some changes. There is some noise in the shadows, but I'd probably have to do a 2 or 3 hour render to get rid of that. But in general, it is pretty good. Now, the main changes I've made: I've added another apple, I've moved some things about slightly, and I've added a poster on the wall, a rather old tatty poster, as you can see, and the wall itself I changed because I just didn't like the look of it with the textures I had on there. So I went out and found an image texture of an old plastered wall, and I've used that and put that texture on the wall instead. And that's really it. Some minor tiddling about with materials, nothing really weird to report, nothing I haven't already shown you. Right, now the important thing for this to get it to trace in any reasonable time was the sampling, and if you look at my sampling section of my render, that's the camera one there, you'll see that I'm rendering with 55 samples, clamping direct and indirect at 2, which helps to reduce noise when you're not sampling so high. Light sampling threshold I set as 0.08, which means it terminates if it's only making a tiny difference. It will terminate the ray, and that's basically what I've done. Now, the other thing that you need to set up is light paths. This is the settings I've got, and if you do all that, you should get a render similar to this. Now, the actual light, the lamp, I've left as a spotlight. 7000 is the figure. It's orange because it's a low in the sky light, so it's kind of evening-y, so I've made it orange, and I've also made it point towards my coffee jug. And the way you do that is you look under Add Object Constraint with the light selected. Damped track is the one that you want. You select as the target the coffee jug or whatever you want it to point at, and then very non-intuitively the axis that you want to get it to point at something, and it's the same with the camera. If you're using this constraint on the camera, is -Z, and that will mean wherever you move the light, it always points at the coffee jug. And I needed to move the light around to find a good place for the shadows, and so I've actually saved this render, so I'm going to show you what I mean. If let's say if I go back to render now, and I'm going to only render 5 samples. Actually, I don't need to do that. What the hell? I don't need to do that. What I can do is just use rendered view. So if I go into, if I hide the render view here, view camera, and there's our camera view, and now if I've got the lamp selected, by using this little thing here I move the lamp around, and I can actually watch and see what the effect is, which is cool. So if I go into rendered, and it's rendered view, and So now if I move this camera about, this lamp about rather, and remember that X is towards us and away from us, Y is left and right, and Z is up and down. So what I can do is if I move it upwards, and we can see we've got this very shady area starting to appear at the top. And then I can move it in Y, and I can move it towards us, which I think is that way from memory, and we might start to get the shadow of the actual bar of the window in here somewhere. And anyway, this is how you can play with the actual light. Now the other thing that's important actually, if you want to try and make the shadows fairly soft as these are, the other thing that's important is the size of the lamp. If I put the size of the lamp down to say 0.1, which I think is the default, and now we can see what's going on, because what we've got is the shadow of our window frame. So we don't really want to see that, so I had it set to a size of 1.5, which softens up all of the shadows, because basically the light source is larger, so light comes from more direction, it comes from all over the light source, it's not a point source. Now if I set it really small, for example 0.05, you see the effect, you get pin sharp shadows, you really do. If you're wondering what that is, I played with putting a shadow mask in front of the lamp to see if it would look better with splotchy shadow on the wall. I decided it didn't, but I never took it out of the way and it's still there. But because of the size of the lamp, it doesn't actually make any difference in the final render. If I go back to solid mode, I'll show you what I did. And this is a technique you can use if you want like dappled shades in forest and things like that. And I just made a plane and made some holes in it and stuck it in the way of the light. And I can actually delete that now, I don't really need it. And that's really it. Now if you want to know how to do some of these other things, like making a poster to go on the wall that's all torn and all the rest of it, then you can ask me and I'll do an actual tutorial on that. If you want me to do a tutorial on anything else, just let me know and I'll do it for you. What I've got planned is a tutorial on basic animation next. We've covered stills, and you can see by the 35 minutes it took to render this why you wouldn't want a really high quality animation, because it's going to take you forever to render. You imagine 35 minutes per frame, 25 frames a second. That's an awful long time. You're going to be there for a few weeks just to do 30 seconds of video, which isn't really on. So the techniques that we use for animation are a little bit different from the techniques that we use for a high quality still image like this one. So I hope you found this helpful and you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please like, share and comment please as well. I'd like to hear what you think. Thank you very much. Bye.
Well, you could subscribe to Arduinotronic, or just go jump in a lake.